Welcome back, everybody. I'm Alfred Lembrock Weber here with author and researcher Olof Dammegard in an exclusive and an historic revelation and disclosure in part 2 of author Olof Dammegard's exclusive update into the deep state assassination of Swedish Prime Minister Olof Dammegard. This program is already being censored on the internet, so be sure that you watch it closely. We're putting it on multiple platforms. Already platforms are taking it down. Over to you, Ole.
Okay, so by the way, the Swedish Prime Minister's name was Olof Palme. You said Dammegard. That was sort of like
it is still early here in Vancouver, BC. There's Ole, there's Olof.
I know.
I apologize to you. I apologize to the spirit of Olof Palme. I apologize to the readers. I got mixed up. Okay.
Once again, I want to say this is part 2. In the first part, I started showing just a few of thousands of bizarre things, including that it seems like the bullets were placed on location after more than a day later than the assassination happened. The death certificate had the wrong address, where the address actually goes straight to the Swedish castle. The coroner, he and his wife, he always said the real truth is in the autopsy report. The autopsy report was heavily edited, like 50% was blacked out. And he kept saying that on international TV as well. The real truth is in the autopsy report. And then he I don't know, but he and his wife decided to do like a Romeo and Juliet suicide. So both of them died on the very same day. Then you have all kinds of weird things around his family, Olof Palme's family, where his wife was on the side of the murder in one coat. It said that she was shot at as well by the lone gunman. And so there's photos of the jacket that she puts forward as evidence with bullet holes in it. But there was one freelance journalist that nobody had expected that was there taking a photo of her when she rushed into the hospital. And there she is wearing a totally different jacket. They're not even close. And she left the murder site in the ambulance together with her husband. That's the official story. But she arrived 6 minutes late to the hospital in a police car. So what happened there? Why was there a swap of vehicles? And also when the body of Olof Palme came to the hospital, they discovered that there was a fresh wound, 11 centimeters long, that had just been opened and stitched together. This has never been questioned how that came there. And so, but this is just one of so many weird things that happened in this investigation. So many documents have been manipulated, has been censored, have been cut to pieces. The tape recordings of the radio communication during the night, the delay, there was like an almost 6-hour delay of the second alarm that went out, where there was one man they put an alert out for one shooter, but a few hours earlier when the first alarm went out, it only went out to very specific vehicles and a small little area around the murder site, not on a national plane or anything. And at that time, the description were 2 shooters. There were 2 people involved, but that changed for no apparent reason. It has never been explained, and so on. So I just want to say a lot of bizarre, weird stuff happened, and I could have gone on for hours showing very strange things. In my book, Coup d'etat in Slow Motion, that you can find on Amazon or my website, lightonconspiracies.com. It's in 2 parts because it's a very thick book. It's almost 1,000 pages, and it's packed with detailed information, names, photos, top secret documents, you name it, it's there. And so today, after making sort of like a base to stand on, I would like to take you to the next chapter. And this is what I, after more than 30 years, have come to find, the jigsaw puzzle I have managed to put together. I want to point out that very few other researchers agree with me. I have been looked upon as very strange for years, but now, the last few years, more and more people in the inner core around Olof Palme have started stepping forward and have actually confirmed the things that I and a few other people have pointed out. So there's especially one researcher called Claes Hedberg, who have a year ago or so, maybe 2 years ago, he published a book that has really helped to open the door to this truth that I think is extremely controversial. So anyway, I would very much like to take you on chapter 2. And this is a massive, massive murder mystery. It's the biggest murder mystery in the history of the world, the most expensive. It's cost the Swedish taxpayer 2 billion Swedish krona for 34 years of doing absolute nothing. They have found out nothing, nothing, and nothing. And the official story is just like JFK, a lone crazy guy. So I would very much like to share screen with you, or I share my screen with you, and then I will take you on this second part of this whole thing. So can you tell me when you see my screen?
Yes, your screens are fine.
Okay, so I just need to, sorry for the delay. We're getting there. So, boom. So the big question, dear Alfred, am I a total tinfoil hat, or is it possible that there's some truth about this whole thing? I just want to point out also, was this a job of a lone crazy guy that they always want to blame? Or what we saw, is it possible that it was actually a coup d'etat, a takeover of the Swedish state, but in slow motion, so that it went past very, very, very slowly, so that no one really discovered what was going on. And last time I just showed a few testimonials here to back up that I would say tinfoil hat is not really the way to describe me. One of the quotes are from you. Another one is Chip Tatum. He was commander of George Bush Sr.'s ultra-secret hit team Pegasus. Another one is Professor Robert Harkavy from the Pentagon, Jim Fetzer, who is a PhD and former Marine, and Alan J. Solarian, who is a FBI consultant. And also around this whole assassination, there was from day one very, very strange things being said. And one of them was by this first chief of the investigation. He was the former chief of the secret police of Sweden called Säpo, had never led a murder investigation. And then here he came and just jumped into a key position where he took over all control of the investigation. And not long after the murder, he said, if the real truth is ever revealed, it will shake Sweden in its foundation. So I ask you, how can you say something like that if you do not know the real truth? He also said other things, like for instance, he said it was Olof Palme that chose the side of the killing. He also said, I'm playing a very hard game or gamble. I'm gambling on a very high level. Sooner or later, you will find out the real truth. Another key person in this whole drama, his name was Carl Lidbom. He was an ambassador, but also the advisor to the Swedish Prime Minister. And he said at a big dinner, gala dinner, he said, I think it was to the wife of Olof Palme, he said, it's best for everyone involved that the real truth never gets revealed. How can you say something like that if you don't know what the real truth is? And so what actually happened? What happened this evening? Officially, he and his wife went to the cinema without bodyguards. They were going there with their son Morten and his girlfriend Ingrid. and they were watching a movie there for an hour and a half or so, and then they took a walk home in the middle of the night. And when they came to a building called the Scandia building, the shooter was standing on the other side of the corner. He stepped out behind them and fired 2 shots. One that went straight through the body of Olof Palme, killed him instantly. And then a second shot that is said to have touched Lisbeth, his wife, back, but without really doing her any injury. So to understand what actually happened, I think it's very important to look at who was Olof Palme. Nowadays, maybe people might have forgotten his name, but in his days, he was very much an international well-known politician. He was one of the names that put Sweden on the world map. But he comes from a very, very bizarre background. He comes from a right-wing family. His first job was in military intelligence. And then he came in on stage very, very young and became the sort of second in charge for the Swedish Prime Minister, Tage Erlander, who was a Bilderberg member. And under his wings, he suddenly moved up to the position of Swedish Prime Minister. And after he became a Prime Minister, he pushed and pushed and pushed on the global scene. One of the things he did was in 1972 or so, when the whole world was bending over to the US, celebrating and just worshiping the US, at least here in Europe. It was during the Vietnam War, and nobody dared to stand up against the US military involvement in Vietnam, except one day Olof Palme and his wife went into this demonstration in Stockholm, where he was working side by side with the Vietnamese ambassador against the US. And this shook the world. It was like a shock that anyone dared to do this whole thing. And it was after that suddenly he was welcomed into so many different countries as a hero, countries that was against the US, countries that was against the New World Order, such as South Africa, such as Cuba, where he was a good friend with Fidel Castro. He was close to the South African apartheid, the people in ANC. There was a resistance movement against the white apartheid. He was friends with Yasser Arafat in the PLO, and so on. So after that sign of bravery that he stood up like that, he was welcomed in. I would very strongly suggest, when you start studying who he really was, I would say that he was a Trojan horse, just like it says here. He was actually working, he was a Bilderberger himself. There was one meeting in Sweden at the Hotel Saltsjöbaden, where he was the key speaker and the person that opened the whole conference. So he was definitely loyal to the bankers and the elite. And after he did that very drastic announcement against the US, he did that multiple times, very, very honest, so raw, emotional, and just spot on against the US military terror domination, you could call it. He was treated. Something is happening with my camera. Okay. So Olof Palme, I believe, was playing a double game, to say the least. After he had gone out and done many of these drastic announcements, I've seen books from biographies from big bankers and so in Sweden and other top politicians, and they say that right after he did these announcements and they went out on TV, he went straight to these bankers saying, don't worry, it's business as usual. This is just something I had to do for another agenda. So he was very close to Henry Kissinger and other key people like that. So on the day he died, like in Sweden, there's not many Bilderberg members, and anyone that looks into the Bilderberg group will soon understand that we're looking at sort of a good part of the world shadow government. It's one of these hidden or secret organizations where they have one meeting every year, or they all the time move location, and no one is allowed to come in and listen and so on. So it's been very secretive over the years. And in Sweden, there's not that many Bilderberg members, but on the day of his death, Olof Palme met or spoke to at least 3 or 4 of them, which is, when you think of that there's maybe 8 or 9 in total, that's quite a lot. So he spoke to Emma Rothschild, the woman up to the left. That was his lover, unofficial, but his lover. It is said in the inner circles around them, they say that it's a well-known secret that Emma Rothschild is the mother of Olof Palme's illegitimate child. It is also today Olof Palme's youngest son, Matthias, lives on the address of Emma Rothschild, and they lived only 150 yards from each other in the old town of Stockholm. So he called her. He also called Sven Aspling, who was part of building up the Swedish Stay Behind Gladio network, a very central figure in the building up of this ultra-secret ghost army that all NATO countries have taken part of creating, and which has turned from a defense tool into a terror tool from the mid-60s and onwards. And this is the terror network that I keep bumping into when I look into different alleged terror attacks and some of the mass shootings as well. And then the last person is Björn Rosengren, who just happened to be at the same cinema or movie theater as Olof and his wife. He sat right behind them, so they started chatting. I don't know if that was by coincidence or it's just out of these few Bilderbergers that are there. I think it's worth mentioning that these are the last people he in contact with. And the Bilderberg group is just, it's got its tentacles everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. So what happened is that Olof Palme had an amazing career. He was, even though the last few years it started going downwards, this was in the beginning of the 80s. And at that time, the Swedish Social Democrat Party was unique in the world. They had been at power, in a power position for, I think, almost 40 years, which is unheard of in other countries. And very few years had there been any kind of sort of where other parties had won over them. They were the power structure. And so his career was going really good. He was aiming at becoming the new Secretary General of the United Nations. He was aiming at a bright future, but there was a problem with this whole thing. And that problem was that he was taking part of many of these elite parties like the ones that we have heard being described through now the revealing evidence that is coming forward about Jimmy Savile in the UK. You got Jeffrey Epstein in the US, you got Marc Dutroux in Belgium, and so on. These were suppliers into these networks of people on a higher level in society, where one of the things that they were being supplied with was parties where they could get anything from drugs to prostitutes to even children, I'm very sorry to say, but that's the level. And these parties were often there to corrupt people, to get them into compromising situation that without their knowledge was being filmed to they later on be able to be used against them should they decide to suddenly become a whistleblower or whatever. But these people are handpicked people and on the topper levels of society in Sweden, but it goes on an international level. And Olof Palme was there as well. He was involved in a scandal called the brothel scandal or bordellhärvan, where he and there was about 200 other people were on lists from a brothel in central Stockholm where girls, underage girls, was part of well, taking care of their clients, so to speak. Anyway, what I believe happened was that in the early 80s, because what few people know is that Olof Palme was actually bisexual as well. He was a womanizer big time. One of his lovers was Shirley MacLaine, the actress. He is the one that she talks about in her books, The Swedish Politician. That is Olof Palme. And I've been in direct contact with her, not speaking contact, but I received a signed photo of Shirley MacLaine where she says, "Ole, keep writing," you know, because I contacted her about this whole thing because I knew that she really cared about him. But her lawyers said that she could not be in touch with me, so okay, fine. Anyway, what seems to have happened is that in the early 1980s, Olof Palme attracted or contracted a certain disease that no one really know. They didn't know what it was. It was a virus disease that had very strange symptoms. So he was going to different experts, both in Sweden and abroad, trying to find out what was wrong with him. And it was only in the mid 80s when Rock Hodgson was one of the first people that stepped forward saying, "I have contracted HIV." And HIV at that time was known as the gay plague. It was only homosexuals that got it, and it was only sexually transmitted in those days. That was what they thought. They didn't know about blood or saliva. And so to be labeled HIV positive or that you had AIDS it was like the worst shameful disease you could ever imagine. And at the same time as the knowledge became bigger and bigger around HIV, it also was, they also came to a point where they said, this is actually what has happened. Olof Palme had got this HIV positive, he was tested HIV positive. And this is where many other researchers think that now this is going in a totally bizarre direction. But I tell you, if you hear me out, this is the only thing where all the pieces suddenly starts making sense. So one of his close friends was the man to the right. His name was Ebbe Carlsson. He was a very peculiar individual. He was officially a book publisher, but I tell you, indirectly, he was working for something called IBO3, which was high up in NATO and which was also part of the controlling mechanism of Stay Behind or the Gladio network. So he was following Olof Palme. He was often in his office. They were close friends. You know, like when people came there to visit Olof Palme, they didn't understand, what is that young guy doing over there lying on the sofa just hanging out? I mean, it was very strange. He bypassed all the security, not a problem. He was very often there. And often also Olof Palme and Ebbe Carlsson were traveling together and they shared hotel rooms. So there was one scandal that was about to explode in Norway when Olof Palme was there, because one day he was found very drunk, and there were two prostitutes that had been in his room, and they had stolen his pants and his wallet. What they forgot to mention was that these were male prostitutes, and I have this from very secure sources on the inside. So this is not just rumor. I'm trying to avoid rumors and just go on. But his friend Ebbe Carlsson was diagnosed with HIV just a few months before. And this went out, it was a big thing in Sweden, a big scandal and so on. But these two people that might have been partners in bed as well, that is what I have from insiders. I can't prove it, but you will see that the inner core of this whole death mystery are people that contracts HIV and dies from it. So we have Olof Palme with a disease that they've finally been able to decide, this is the disease, this is this new horrible virus that nobody knows anything about that goes under the name of AIDS or HIV. And one of the symptoms with this disease is that your face, I mean, you've seen, I'm sure, horrible pictures of people who have contrived it where you can't hide it. You go all very, very skinny, you're dark around the eyes, you get all kinds of skin disease and so on. So after it was they secretly found out what this problem was. And it was, among other places, the owner of a multi-international company called Tetra Pak. They're the ones that make the packages for milk and for all kinds of stuff, you know, the folded packages. They're one of the, his name was Hans Rausing. He's one of the wealthiest, or was one of the wealthiest people in the world. And he had very advanced laboratories for testing when it comes to milk and other beverages and so on for these packages. So he was asked, I don't know, hang on. So Hans Rausing was asked if they could use his laboratory to find out what was going on. And this is one of the places where they found that this is most probably this exact virus. He went to another specialist also that after his death was interviewed about him possibly having HIV, and the virus expert more or less said yes. He didn't answer directly, but indirectly he said yes. And then just a few weeks later, this doctor died as well. So anyway, it seems like, I believe this is what happened in the way that I've been able to find out. Because of this disease, the inner core of the Social Democrat Party and the inner core around Olof Palme suddenly were in a horrible situation. They found themselves in a situation where if this came out, the Social Democrat Party would go down in flames because this whole shame thing would be so overpowering. All his life work, everything would be forever forgotten. And the only thing that people would remember was that Olof Palme had AIDS. His family name would be forever connected with shame. Everything would be horrible, horrible. So there were some secret meetings here. We had the book publisher, or the person working for Gladio, Ebbe Carlson, up to in the right-hand corner. We had his friends. They were also partners, and he later died of AIDS as well. The first head of the investigation, Hans Holmér, the guy who said, if the real truth comes out, that will shake Sweden's foundation. We had the guy that I mentioned in the last interview, like a Swedish James Bond, who was very, very central in being like a fixer. He was also a weapon expert. He was a right-wing, he was homosexual as well, and a right-wing military, very, very militant, dominant person, who was, among other things, the guy that chose the weapon, the sidearm for the Swedish police forces. So he was way up there. So he was called in to these meetings as well. And then we had the ambassador, or the advisor to Olof Palme, which was, his name was Carl Lidbom. This is an ugly one. This is a really, really ice cold, manipulating advisor in the background. And then we had Bernd Carlsson, who was a close associate to Olof Palme, and who was later killed in the bombing of the plane that went down over Lockerbie in Scotland, if you remember, a few years later, where it said that what they managed to find out was that the bomb was located inside a tape recorder in the luggage of Bernd Carlsson. And just before he died, he was flying from, he was in New York with his girlfriend there. I'd spoken to people very close to them. And he said to his girlfriend, I am one of the few people that know the real truth about the assassination of Olof Palme. And then boom, the plane exploded, and end of story, Bernd Carlsson. So these meetings were going on there. And at these meetings, we also had, I believe, a close friend to to Olof Palme, Harry Schein, who was very much involved in TV productions in Sweden and film productions. And so the brain behind the whole setup was this man, Carl Lidbom, the advisor. Because during these crisis meetings, that was top secret, it was only a handful of people that were there. They were discussing what on earth are we going to do? Because it will only be a matter of time before this disease will be visible in the face of Olof Palme. So either, it was like he said to Olof Palme, you can do the so-called right thing. You can step up, be honest about it. You can have a press conference saying, I'm very sorry, I contracted the HIV, the HIV virus. I retrieved it through having gay sex with most likely Ebbe Carlsson. And well, this is the truth. Now I stand for it, boom. What would happen, like I said, his career, his family, his name, everything would be totally destroyed overnight, boom. Or, and this is where Carl Lidbom came in, or we can do it like this. He said, remember JFK, remember Martin Luther King. The second the bullet entered their head, they turned into a martyr. They turned into a legend whose names would forever be highlighted in neon lights. So Carl Lidbom came up with the idea, what if we stage an assassination? We stage an assassination. The way we're going to do it, we're going to have a double. We set the whole thing up. We plan the whole thing. Then we have a double that's going to officially be killed. There were going to be 2 ambulances. And when the one ambulance drives the double to the hospital, where we are in control of everything, including the doctors, the coroners, everything, so we can fake everything. At the same time, another ambulance will drive you and take you up to an airport in a bit north up in Sweden. And from there, you will fly down to the south of Europe, where you will get the best treatment ever. You will be living in one of these castles belonging to the so-called elite. I mean, all the people he was or many of the people he was mingling with was very, very wealthy and key, very high positions. And at the same time, his family could come and visit him, his lovers could come and visit him. And in the meantime, they would then create this legend overnight called Olof Palme that would be forever remembered for all of the fantastic things that he had done. So, question, option 1 or option 2? I mean, you have to ask yourself, what would you have done? I mean, the right thing would be to stand up and tell the truth and destroy everything, or do this one. And so it took a while, but once they decided what to do, I'm sorry, I'm just going to go forward here because here are different testimonies of people that were working in the laboratories that was on the inside confirming this exact thing, also within the police force. Now, after all of these years, they're stepping forward saying and confirming the things that I and other researchers have been saying for many, many years. Anyway, so it seems like Olof Palme, after maybe a day or two, and also after talking to his wife, decided, I'm going to go for the fake assassination. So how to do that? So from, I think, somewhere around September, October of 1985, suddenly Olof Palme's behavior changes drastically from being very, very involved in politics, very involved in debates and TV interviews and on an international level. Suddenly, he doesn't give a damn. He is not interested at all. He's sitting at meetings, playing the flute, looking out the window, sometimes very emotional. He starts crying. I had this from biographies written by people that were very close to him that didn't understand what was going on. They just said he was very different. What he was doing, I would suggest, is he was, from that point on, he started creating the legend Olof Palme. And one of the things that he needed to focus on was to get rid of all the evidence that could pull down and blow this legend, created legend, into smithereens. So at that point in time, he started doing all kinds of bizarre stuff. He stopped a gunpowder delivery that was going down through East Germany on its way to the war between Iran and Iraq, which was there. For one thing, he was a peace negotiator in that war, and at the same time, he was also an arms dealer from a neutral country. I mean, how is that even possible? But that is what he was doing. But at this point, suddenly he started stopping these things that he had been part of creating. And this later erupted in a massive big scandal called the Bofors scandal. Bofors is the name of the Swedish arms factory that makes very, very advanced weaponry, including very, very advanced landmines. Anyway, so he stopped this. He was also involved there was this illegal weapons transport on an illegal basis, sort of on an international basis, where there was like a hidden network where they were smuggling weapons right, left, and center between what they called green and red countries. Because there is this thing in international arms dealing, they need to show with the so-called end-user certificates where the weapons are destined. So according to international law, you're not allowed to sell weapons to countries that are at war. At least Sweden is not allowed to it. So what Sweden did was they sold it to countries that was not at war, and then they fiddled around with the papers, changing the end-use certificate, and then just got the weapons going. So, for instance, from Sweden, the weapons could go to, instead of going to, at that time, Iran, Iraq, they would go to Singapore and then up to India, and then from India down to Saudi or whatever, and then from Saudi, and boom, 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 and then they would end up right in the middle of the war. That was the whole idea. And some of the people involved in this whole arms trading was George Bush Sr., among other, and Oliver North, the guy that was in charge of the so-called enterprise, and involved in so much horrible, horrible, horrible things in the world, that Oliver North is still free and walking around in the streets. I mean, come on, what do you need to do to get behind bars? Anyway, at this point in the fall of 1985, I have this from Chip Tatum, who was working right underneath of Oliver North, who was involved in the whole Iran-Contra scandal. That was a matter of stealing weapons from the National Guard in the US, and sending them down in big military planes, 1C-30s, to Honduras, Nicaragua, El Salvador, to the Contras down there. And then they swapped the load and pumped the planes with cocaine, raw cocaine. And then these were flown back in coolers and stuff by, among other people, Chip Tatum, into airports or airstrips like Mena in Arkansas, where Bill Clinton was one of the people receiving the drugs that was then being delivered out. But anyway, at this point in time, Oliver North was sent by George Bush to Stockholm to get Olof Palme to sign some of these end-user certificates. I believe it was for some Stinger missiles. And this was not the first time, and there had not been any problem before. But this time, when Oliver North came to Stockholm, according to Chip Tatum, who overheard him speaking about it, Palme gave him the finger. He gave him the boot and threw him out. He said, "Don't you ever dare to show your ugly face here another time. And by the way, if you do, I will bring you down, all of you, not only you, all of you, including George Bush Sr., who is not a guy you would want to mess with. I can tell you that." Chip Tatum, who worked directly under George Bush Sr. for many, many years as his hitman, among other things, he described George Bush Sr. as one of the most intelligent people he had ever encountered, and by far the most evil. So that just shows you who we are against. So we look here once again at the, here I have, you can compare the coroner's report of the autopsy, the one that was heavily censored. And then after more than 30 years, I managed to get hold of the original. And it's very strange because the things that they marked with black doesn't make any sense at all. But sometimes maybe you mark a lot of things so that it won't be too obvious exactly the things that you have were there to delete. And one of the things that they have marked over here is his length, his height. He was 175 centimeters. I think that's 5'7", maybe something like that. And here, one of the things that they marked with a big black pen, his height, his length, how tall he was. Why? Oh, why would you do a thing like that? Maybe because the autopsy was not done on Olof Palme himself. So I've made this this whole thing for the Swedish audience, so there's a lot of videos in Swedish, so I can't really show you. But also the autopsy protocol, if you see the original and the ones that was totally blacked out, you will see, if you compare the signatures of these people, the last one, no, none of them are identical. Only the person who have written it from the dictaphone, you know, who the secretary, her signature is the same one on the original as the one that has been censored, but all the other ones are not. Can you see there's slight difference? They have not been signed at the same time. Possibly the one, no, not the one in the middle either. All three of them are not identical. So somebody has seriously tampered with the signatures. So here's my book in 2 parts, and boom. So how to do this, how to create a fake assassination, because suddenly we are talking about theater play on a very high level, you know, because what happens if something like this would be revealed? Maybe it would shake Sweden in its foundation. Maybe it would destroy Sweden's good reputation internationally. So how to do it? Because if they use their own people, for instance, they had access to the so-called baseball gang that I described in the chapter 1 here, which we're going to come back to. Very disciplined, right-wing, militant people that would follow order. They would have no problem killing a person. And they hated, by the way, Olof Palme. So that wouldn't be a problem. But there would be a problem if someone nosy and a geek like myself would start nosing around and start finding out, well, there's one, there's one, there's one. And if all of these were connected directly to Olof Palme, that could create a massive blowback. So what did they have to do? They had to contract a real team of assassins. Because also, not only because of the problem with a possible blowback, but also possible blackmail of people that were involved in the inner core that would know the real truth and that could just say, well, I want $45 billion tomorrow, otherwise I'm gonna blow the whistle. So they just couldn't have it. So what they did was, through some contacts, I believe it was through a contact called Pt.2, who belongs to the Wallenberg family, very powerful in the world shadow government, who was for some years working in South Africa. They contacted a major down there called Craig Williamson. He is a South African major, and he was perfect for this whole thing because some years before he had infiltrated the helping organization of ANC down in South Africa. In South Africa, there was the African National, I forgot what it stands for, Africa. Anyway, it was the Blacks Freedom Movement, ANC. And one of the biggest people that, or the biggest founders of ANC in Africa was Sweden through Olof Palme. So Craig Williamson hated Palme as well. He would have no problem killing him. But what had happened was that he had managed to infiltrate these different networks that were helping ANC, and he managed to get himself. What happened was that he came to, I think it was Holland, where he went and applied for asylum, political asylum, because he said that he had been standing up for the black rights in South Africa. He had been imprisoned, he had been tortured, he had been, so he was welcomed as a hero. I have no idea. Let me see. So he was welcomed as a hero in Sweden as well. And so he got to Sweden, was celebrated by the Social Democrat Party, and then somehow, I don't know, he managed to start to work for the Social Democrat Party as well through these different organizations, and managed to get his way up. So he at one point were writing speeches to people right next to Olof Palme. I mean, the second in charge. Unbelievable. And at the same time, he was pumping down information to BOSS, that was the secret South African police that was fighting a war against ANC, leaking out all kinds of information that helped them fight the ANC. And it was Craig Williamson that, what was his name? Oh, come on. Stephen Biko. It was Craig Williamson that leaked information from Sweden out to his colleagues down in South Africa to reveal the position of where Stephen Biko was. Stephen Biko was one of the heroes in the ANC movement. So they arrested him and then they tortured him to death. And this has become a big, big thing international. Like Peter Gabriel did a song called Biko about Stephen Biko. I think David Attenborough made a movie as well about Stephen Biko. I think that was called Biko as well. And so a big, big name and a big, big assassination. But since he was had learned the whole layout of Stockholm, he had inside contacts inside the government buildings, he knew the whole layout of everything, he would be the perfect guy. And he managed, this was years before the assassination, but he managed to escape out of Sweden just before he was exposed, because they found out that he was actually a super spy. That was also what he was named in international media, super spy Craig Williamson, who came back to South Africa and was promoted to major. But at the time of the assassination, I believe he was a colonel. Anyway, so Olof Palme, indirectly through his contact, sent a contract, a paid contract for his own assassination. I repeat that. Olof Palme sent out a contract with his own name on it to Craig Williamson. Craig Williamson had no idea that Palme was involved or knew anything about this at all. So he just, as always, followed order. He was given a name of the target. He was given the finances. And so he started setting together a hit team of people, of assassins, and soldiers of fortunes, and they were gathered together. They came from multiple different countries, multiple different organizations. They had no real connections that could be easily exposed by someone like myself. And then they was gathered at a farm some 10 miles west of Johannesburg in South Africa. It went under the name of Daisy Farm, but it was actually a torture center. It was a death center where they brought black prisoners, killed them, slaughtered them, burned them to death. Horrible, horrible, horrible. But for months, they were sitting down there and being educated and going through the whole how to carry out this assassination. We have this from this man, this agent to the right here, who exposed the whole thing and later was hunted all over the world because he had exposed too much. Dirk Otzi was his name. One of the mercenaries was Anthony White here to the left. And if you compare to the drawing, if you remember in chapter 1, there was this artist who made a drawing of a man she saw leaving the neighborhood where the assassination took place some 20 minutes later. It's very closely resembling him. And when he saw the picture, he said, I didn't know I was that good looking. Then we had Peter Castleton. He was from Rhodesia. He was a soldier of fortune who had been working and carried out multiple assassination attempts on leaders of countries of African states, but failed a few of them. Another guy was this pilot here called Peter Hasselton, who was later crushed by a truck up against a wall. We had Frank Esser, who was a German agent, but he was working for BOSS as well. BOSS was the secret police of South Africa. So he was a drug dealer and a weapons arms dealer in Germany, but working also for BOSS. And he was the guy that when the team of assassins was flown from South Africa to Luxembourg, he picked them up in his Winnebago and then drove the team up to Sweden, up through Germany, Denmark, and into Sweden, where they were located. Now, this guy, Franz Esser, was later, when this whole thing started to erupt, he and his family was killed in a car crash. Then we had a Norwegian mercenary, our soldier of fortune, Ole Christian Olstad, who was a friend of Craig Williamson, a very brutal individual as well, had been active in Lebanon and other war zones. He was one of the people also that met up with this team. And then we had another German called Heine Hümann, who was, he was also involved in multiple different assassinations. One of them, a woman, an ANC delegate in Paris, France. Her name was Dulcie September, and she was gunned down in the streets of Paris by, and Heine Hümann was one of them. And here's a drawing by one of the people from in the night of the assassination that made a drawing of one of the people with walkie-talkies that spoke a very strange language. He said it sounded like some Swiss German or something, but actually it was Afrikaans they were speaking. And he said also, the witness, that he had a very high-pitched voice, which is exactly what Heine Hümann has as well. He was at that time a sleeping asset, a sleeping agent in Sweden. He was working at a garage as a mechanic, his own garage, workshop where he was having very strange clients there. You know, there were lots of Porsches coming late at night, in and out, and well, I'm going to come back to this guy as well. This is the woman that he was part of killing in Paris. And then also there was another guy who was part of this small group. His name was Milan Valverius, and he was working for high-level police officer in Sweden. And he was part of also trying to recruit a patsy or a killer on location in Sweden. So it's not only the team of assassins, but they were also trying to recruit assassins on locations. And so this guy, Kenneth Nailberg, was offered $1 million to kill Olof Palme. And he was offered this job by an agent that was working very closely to the chief of the National Homicide Squad or department. You know, the absolute top of him was the guy that was part of also trying to recruit a shooter of the Swedish Prime Minister. Now, the agent, not long after this assassination, was also killed in a car crash, a mysterious car crash. So you can see that many of these people have a tendency to live by the gun, they die by the gun. It's a very, very brutal life. So in the meantime, as we have one team being put together that are sent to Sweden to commit this assassination, they're being flown up there to map the movement of the target. I don't know if they knew who the target was. They were just being equipped with the name and all the details where they moved around. Yes, of course, they would know his name, but also the headquarters of the government, Social Democratic Party, and so on. And one of the buildings that was very central in this whole drama was the Skandia building. Skandia was an insurance company that was founded by Olof Palme's grandfather. At that time, it went under the name of Thule, which is also a very interesting name when you go into occult areas. You have the Thule Gesellschaft under Hitler, that was his occult division. You got the Thule Air Force Base on Greenland, which is also has been involved in a lot of occult things. Anyway, so I don't know if it's just a coincidence, but Olof Palme's grandfather, who started this insurance company, named it Thule, and then over the years it changed into the name of Skandia. And Skandia has, I believe, become like a front of, it's an insurance company, but it's funding black ops on a big scale. And in that building, which is exactly where he was officially murdered outside, was also the headquarters of the Swedish Stay Behind. So the Gladio headquarters in Sweden was exactly like less than 5-10 yards from where he was killed. So was that a coincidence or not? So it even appears that Olof Palme was many times involved and had meetings in this building when it came to the creation of the Swedish Gladio, so-called Stay Behind. The people that were helping him was William Colby, who was at the time of when they built this up in the 50s and the 60s, were an ambassador in Scandinavia. He was not only in Sweden, but in other countries as well, helping to build this whole thing up. And he later became the director of the CIA. So a big guy in this area. And then you had, to the right here, we have Reinhard Gehlen, who was an intelligence expert under Adolf Hitler. He was part of Operation Paperclip, where he was smuggled out through the rat lines organized by the Vatican into the US, where he was part of joining up with Allen Dulles and John Foster Dulles and so to change the OSS into the CIA. And he was very, very good at what he was doing. He was also, and that's why he was chosen to be part of building and creating the Gladio network in all NATO countries, especially in Europe. Reinhard Gehlen, by the way, was also the one who murdered Nikola Tesla together with Otto, he was the bodyguard of Adolf Hitler. I always forget his last name. Sorry about that, but these two were the last people to enter into Nikola Tesla's room where he was living. I mean, he was very poor and alone at the time. They entered the building, and when they left, he was dead, and all of his secrets had been stolen. Otto, I'm sorry. We also have, I mean, there's so many of these people. If we talk of big names that have been killed around these big ones, you have, for instance, Bob Marley died of cancer. So that seemed natural, but I would very strongly suggest that it was not, because this is, we jump a little bit, but this is in the late 70s. He was a very, very powerful figure, being more and more powerful internationally among African countries, but all countries or minorities. He was seen as a hero that dared to speak out against this. And at Jamaica at that time, there was almost civil war, and the CIA was pumping in guns and all kinds of explosives and whatever to create an absolute chaos and a civil war so that they could go in and take over. And here, Bob Marley became very central in calming the whole thing down. So an assassination attempt was carried out against Bob Marley. He was almost killed. His wife was shot multiple times, as well as his agent. They were all three in the kitchen, and there were these shots fired. The door was kicked in and shots were fired. There was a bullet that touched the arm of Bob Marley, but he survived. But after that, he was surrounded by bodyguards. And at that point, there was an American film team, a film crew that came down to make a documentary about the life of Bob Marley. And so when this film director, we see him here to the right, when he approached Bob Marley, his bodyguard said, absolutely no way. But Bob said, no, please let him through, let him through. And so Bob Marley was a very fit guy who was very much into soccer and fitness and so on. And he loved blue jeans and he loved cowboy boots. So this film director who came and wanted to do the documentary knew this, and he brought with him a pair of cowboy boots, beautiful boots, as a gift. So Bob was like, I have this from a photographer that was there when this happened. So Bob was really, really happy when he saw the boots. He said, oh my God, I love them. And then he pulled one of the boots, he put one of the boots on. And when he did that, he screamed out in pain and pulled off the boot again. And there was this piece of copper wire that had punctured his big toe. And that is exactly the toe where he later developed cancer from, the cancer that then killed him in the long run. So who was this film director? Well, can you believe it or not? His name is Peter Colby, and he is the son of William Colby, the director of the CIA. Is that a coincidence? I'm not blaming him, because maybe he wasn't aware of these boots. Maybe he was just given them to pass them forward. So I'm not pointing at him. I'm just saying, is this just a coincidence? I think not. So to carry this whole thing out, what was needed was a headquarters. And I believe that the headquarters where the operation was carried out with this assassination attempt or assassination against Olof Palme was below a fire station. It's called, it's right on above the stairs where the killer disappeared, on the left-hand side, just 100 yards back further away. And inside it, I've been in there myself. I managed to get in there through a military contact that I had. There's a hidden elevator that goes down, and it went straight down into a bunker that used to be the bunker of the Swedish king in case of war or emergencies. And this is part of a hidden tunnel network under the city of Stockholm. There's 618 kilometers of tunnels that most people have no idea about. It's on the level of below the subway system. But anyway, in the meantime, and this is the type of entrances you see, it's just like a gated entrance with a padlock on it. And most people, I think that, oh, it's going down to a garage or something. No, 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 no. That's straight down there. So you have tunnel connections. I have that from people that have done their military service in Stockholm. They're called city soldiers, and they do their military service down there below ground. And they say they're massive tunnels. They're like electric trucks, they're trains, all kinds of traffic and stuff is going on down there. And it's also connecting everything from the government building to the Gladio headquarters, the fire station, all of the important, buildings, the parliament, the government, all of these are connected, but on a level underneath through these invisible tunnels. So what happened was, let's just do a quick recap. Olof Palme is in a situation where it's just a matter of time before it will show that he has AIDS. Absolute, the most shameful exit you could ever make. So his advisor called Lidbom comes up with the idea, why don't we arrange a staged assassination, a fake assassination, where you will not be killed. We will have 2 ambulances and a double. We will do it late in the evening where no one will see it happen. It will be dark. Everybody will be out on winter vacations. No one will be there. We do it right outside the Skandia building that we have total control over since it's the headquarters of the Stay Behind movement. We got access to the tunnel system. We got access to all the key people in this whole drama through the baseball gang. If you remember in chapter 1, I said that this evening, this group of about 10 people in this very brutal right-wing police officer gang, the baseball gang, this evening, they just swap place with people in all the key positions, controlling the communication when people call in and saying somebody has been shot, delaying it. They were in control of sending out directed alarms to very specific police cars, not everyone. They were driving the ambulances. They were observed as multiple of the walkie-talkie men. They were the guy that was standing outside the cinema or the the movie theater, while Olof Palme and his wife was in there guarding so that they wouldn't come out. All of the key positions. Also, they were the first police van that arrived on location. They were the ones chasing the gunmen, even though they acted like they were a bunch of children, laughing, not taking cover, not taking it serious at all, because they knew it was fake. So all of these, also there was one car that was driving around with very advanced technical equipment in the back seat, possibly amplifying the signals between the walkie-talkies. Because at that point in '86, it was before cell phones and all of these things. There were no way, and high buildings, they needed to amplify the signals to make it work. So all of these people were on their way and being prepared for this hit. And they had decided on a specific date, the 28th of February, a Friday as well. It was going to happen on a Friday. If you see, many of the hits internationally are done on Fridays. And the reason for that, I would suggest, I speculate, was because of the stock market. Because on Friday, if it happens Friday or Friday evening, then boom, they close down the stock market and Wall Street if it's in the US. And so for 2-3 days, out of consideration and for the empathy for families and so on, absolutely not. That's not what it's about. It's about what do you call it? Insider trading. That people that knows that it's going to happen, if they know it, they can make billions on things like that. 9/11, Olof Palme, these type of JFK as well, are almost the all-time high when it comes to the what people have earned. We're talking massive amounts. But just like with 9/11, you can see right before it happened, it suddenly skyrockets and boom, that's when it happened. But they need to cover their tracks. And that's why they need 2-3 days where no one has any way of seeing what they're doing. So they close it down. It's down with a flag on half, half, blah, blah, blah. And then they clear it out so that when they open up Monday or Tuesday, when they say, now we are so sorry for the family of the victim, but now we will open up again. And by then, they've covered most of their tracks. So it's very hard to see it afterwards. But while they were preparing for a fake assassination, the whole idea was to get a real team of assassins up there. Otherwise, they would have problems with possible blowback or blackmail. So they needed that someone like myself could not just see right away that this is an inside job. So that's why they recruited real assassins that came up there. But the whole idea was that the guy that would supply them with weapons, James Bond, if you remember him, called Gustav Östling, he would be in charge of the weapons, the ammo, the vehicles, everything that was going to be delivered to this hit team. So he was going to make sure that they practiced with the weapons that were being given to them in Sweden, so they avoided any kind of arms, illegal arms that could be exposed if they passed any borders. So they was equipped with all the weapons in Sweden. They test fired, everything was working. And the idea was, on the day of the assassination, just before it happened, he would swap the ammunition to blanks. This is key. He would swap the ammunition to blanks so that the assassins themselves thought that they were firing real bullets. Okay? Otherwise, if they knew that it was staged, then we have the problem again with blackmail and all of these things. So they needed to believe that it was a real hit as well. So the whole idea was him swapping the ammunition at the day of the assassination. But while all of this was being prepared, and here comes another level. Are you okay with the background sound here?
Just yes, give me a... Yes, the sound is fine.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so here we come to the next level. Hold onto your horses, because this is going weird here now. Because while Olof Palme was spending all of his awake time to create the legend of Olof Palme, getting rid of all kinds of evidence that could show his involvement in illegal, whatever it was. So he was sitting there, I believe, with like a document shredder every night, just also stopping operations that he was involved in. One of the things he wanted was to make a nuclear power-free zone of Scandinavia, of the North, meaning that would stop and block American submarines with atomic, atomic submarines. One thing, and the Baltic Sea and Scandinavia is extremely important for the big superpowers, because that is what is in between the US and Russia. So that on its own was just like totally freaking them out. Also, Olof Palme had planned for a meeting with Gorbachev, the leader of the former Soviet Union, where he was seen as a traitor by many people in military positions and also internationally. They were freaking out. What is he going to do? What kind of deal is he going to do with Gorbachev? Is he going to sell out? Is he going to sell out the elite? Is he going to sell? Nobody knew. So they were freaking out because nobody understood, why is he behaving like this? He has always been a well-trusted asset, and now he's turned his back on us. So they didn't know, has he gone crazy? Is he on some kind of drugs or what? So there was a series of top secret meetings in Wiltshire in the UK. Here are some documents, cosmic top secret. That is as top secret as you can get from these meetings. And at these meetings that took place, I believe, in this mansion that is owned by the owner of the Swedish weapons factory, Bofors. His name was Erik Penser. And he has this building in Wiltshire, and it's almost like, when you see James Bond movies, they often meet with, he's going to meet M, the guy who's in charge of all the technical things that can explode and shoot and whatever. And they meet at a place like this where you got different agents training and practicing on the lawns and stuff. It's almost a bit like that, I would suggest. And by the way, that owner, Erik Penser, made more than 1 billion from the death of Olof Palme. I mean, it's unbelievable. But anyway, at this series of secret meetings, there were people from NATO, there was people from Gladio, there were politicians from different intelligence agencies. All of them are only labeled with their initials. And it's very, very hard I'm still trying to find out what actually happened. These meetings are on a very high level. I mean, internationally, politics on a very, very high level. There are many, many countries involved in the meeting. What are we going to do over there? What are we going to do there? It's sort of like when they play war games with the world, like that. But one of the main topics on this meeting was, what are we going to do with the Swedish Prime Minister? And in these documents, that he's labeled SPM, Swedish Prime Minister. And after discussing and freaking out, because they were like, what are we going to do? He's absolutely mad. We have no idea where this is going to end. They decided, we need to stop him. We need to terminate him. So NATO then appointed a hit team to be sent to Stockholm to terminate the Swedish Prime Minister, Olof Palme, which was carried out. So a NATO team, this is where I think they were trained. And here we have George Bush private hitman, Chip Tatum. Maybe I can play you a recording where he talks about this exact thing when Oliver North went to see Olof Palme. You can hear it from him himself. I hope you can hear this. Can you hear the sound?
What do you know about the Olof Palme assassination of the Swedish Prime Minister?
Give me a thumbs up if you can hear it.
No, it's very low. For it to play, you would have had to click 2 little things before you share. Well, there's little buttons that you have to click about computer audio, and that would have engaged your computer audio. You can
Oh,
go out of the share and click those two things and come back in.
oh, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
Okay.
He's just saying exactly what I described before. But very important as well is that there was a lot going around around the Iran-Contra scandal and how they were trying to shut up people that were involved. And one of them were Barry Seals, a pilot that has now been, he's been played by Tom Cruise in a movie, I think it's called American Made or American Made, I think, where it shows a big portion of what he was part of. He was also one of the pilots for Operation 40 that we have exposed before, being involved in the JFK assassination. He was one of the people flying a plane out of Dallas that day. But it had come to a point where he had become a problem for George Bush Sr. and the whole Iran-Contras with Felix Rodriguez. If you look next to George Bush Sr., you've got Felix Rodriguez, another guy from Operation 40. And so they were at a point where they needed to clean up, loose ends. And so Barry Seals was officially murdered by some drug cartel members in Baton Rouge in Louisiana. But actually, it was Oliver North that ordered the killing. Chip Tatum overheard him, ordered the killing. And so he was gunned down just before he could testify against George Bush Sr. And in his pocket, he had a private number going straight to George Bush Sr. And this killing of Barry Seals was just 1 week before the assassination of Olof Palme. And I strongly suggest that they are connected. Well, it just goes into so many different variations. Anyway, but with the NATO team, if we call them the fake team and the NATO team, then I hope we understand each other. Because what happened when the NATO team was sent in on location in Sweden, what they discovered was that, oh my God, there's already a team of assassins here. Because they were gonna map the same target. So they were in the same locations, and they saw there people with walkie-talkies here. And so they started to seeing that, oh my God, they are already planning to take him out. So reports were sent back to Wiltshire, the meetings there, saying, what are we going to do? And then the people there decided, well, this is excellent. What we'll do is we'll just shadow the fake team that they thought were real. And once they carry out their operation, what we'll make sure is that we'll sabotage some things in it, so it would be blamed totally on them, and they would never ever be able to point anything back to NATO, meaning we're going to finish the job as well for them, but mess it up so that they will go down for it. So suddenly we have 2 hit teams in Sweden, in Stockholm, following the same target. So one of the people that were involved in the NATO team was a mass serial killer and CIA asset called Michael Vernon Townley. He has been involved in so many different assassinations, and he's now under an FBI witness protection program. This is Robert Smith in South Africa that he killed. He killed Pablo Neruda, who was a Nobel Prize winning poet in Chile. He killed he was part of killing Orlando Lettier in Washington, D.C. on Embassy Row with a car bomb. And at that time, also the associate of Orlando Lettier, Ronnie Moffett, was also killed in that car bomb. So here we have Michael Vernon Townley, who actually has the same controller at the CIA. He was pulled out 1 day before the hit in Dallas, but he has the exact same controller, David Atlee Phillips, and this is David Atlee Phillips, as Lee Harvey Oswald when he was a CIA operative, and James Files, who is the shooter behind the picket fence. We're looking at the same team of mechanics being moved around from country to country to carry out these things. Here we have this car bomb at the Embassy Row in Washington, D.C. And the guy that supplied the bomb was actually James Files, the shooter behind the picket fence. These people work together but the person that was behind the planning and also, I believe, pulling the trigger to detonate the whole thing was Michael Van Townley, with other people from Operation 40 as well that was taking part of this whole, and were also put in prison for it. We have another guy called Felipe Vidal Santiago, who was standing right next to the so-called Umbrella Man in Dealey Plaza. I believe the Umbrella Man was a man by the name of Roy Hargraves, who was also very connected to Operation 40. All of these are very closely connected. And Felipe Vidal Santiago, he's the guy that steps out in front of the limo in Dallas, which is, you see it right before the shots are fired here, to slow down the limousine. And the Umbrella Man is there to point the crossing point for all the shooters so that they would fire at the same time, so that they could not be, you know, they needed to blame it on one shooter, 3 shots, even though there might have been like up to 20 shots fired. So they couldn't have it go like boom, 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 like this. That's why they had the umbrella there, even though it was a sunny day. So Felipe Vidal Santiago, after the Dallas hit, was he went under the name of Charles Morgan. He was working for ITT, which is very closely connected to the CIA, and all types of telecommunication. It was also ITT that delivered all the telecommunication to the Adolf Hitler war machine. Anyway, Charles Morgan, which was his name afterwards, his code name, traveled around in the world, and one of the things that he did was when somebody was about to be taken out, his job was to find local patsies that could take the fall or be part of it. And an acquaintance of me, this man to the left, was approached by Charles Morgan or Felipe Vidal Santiago with a top secret document offering him $1 million to take out Olof Palme. And it was with a whole seal of the White House and the whole shebang. Here I am together with him. He's quite a colorful individual. Johan von Bierschen is his name. Then another man in the NATO team was, he went under the name of the Prince of Terror, Stefano Della Chiai, an Italian guy, mass murderer, a master terrorist involved in the NATO Gladio network. And he was, among other things, responsible for multiple bombings, one of them in Bologna in Italy, we see here. And he's also a friend of Michael Van Townley, the first person I introduced you to. Then there was also Julio Izquierdo well, he's closely associated. And then there were at least one sniper or more that I'm not sure who they were. I'm still trying to figure it out. Should we end this part here and continue?
Yes, that can happen. And so you're saying that this would be the end of part 2, and then it's a real cliffhanger because we don't know. Those of us who have followed this should be a movie that people see, and because we don't know right now, those of us who have not followed, including me, you could have any kind of ending here. So we're, without a spoiler alert, this is the end of part 2 at a very poignant level with author and researcher Olof Dammegard. Do you want to leave it here then, and we'll pick it up in part 3?
What I want to say is we've only scratched on the surface. We've only scratched on the surface. You're in for a ride here because there's a lot of things that's going to go down. And I want to thank you for having the courage to go out with this. This is very controversial, I tell you. It has been shot down right, left, and center when I've stepped forward. And this is also why I hesitated doing interviews about this assassination, because most people want an answer in like 10 minutes. So who shot him? Why did they do it? But you cannot do it quickly I hope you agree with me, because it becomes so multi-layered and tricky to follow. So this is also, you said about a movie. I'm already writing on a movie script. I've been writing on a novel, which is going to be with all the exact names, exactly what I believe happened, which is called Guilty Victim, because this is exactly what we are seeing it. Guilty victim. He ordered his own assassination. And I've written about 200 pages so far. It's like a Dan Brown novel, short chapters, and I haven't had to make anything up. The story itself is mind-blowing, and you will see the further we get into this, it's just, in the end, you're like this.
Well, let me just say this, that those who are watching, I hope if you're just tuning in for part 2, go back and watch part 1, which is on Exopolitics TV on YouTube and Exopolitics TV on Brightchin. It's been censored by one of our platforms. This is that hot for some reason. And this is now part 2. You can support all the Dammegard's work by going to his website, Light on Conspiracies. Now, Ola, so we're going to pick up part 3 on this green light for murder. However, traditionally, you always end with a prayer. So I'm just thinking, if you would like to end your screen share, or do you want to say your prayer right here with?
I want to say, there's a 50 million krona reward for this case. That's the official story. Absolutely not. These money do not exist at all. It's just there to look good, because otherwise maybe we could afford a few beers and kick back for a while. But I'm taking you into a world that is hard to grasp to start with. So please go back, just like you say, chapter 1, go through it. There's so many details. In my book, I try to keep it more easily understood, but still, there's so many facts to this case, and it goes into all the different areas, connections into JFK, Bob Marley, Jimi Hendrix, John Lennon, many different international top assassinations. You got into the Iran-Contra scandal, you got into the Freemasonic networks, the whole setup behind the scenes. So my book, Coup d'etat in slow motion, it's available in Swedish, English, and German now. And it has been described by Michael Moore's Swedish agent as a truth bomb. He said he's never seen anything like it, and he said, you're never going to get it published, which was true, because I had to do it myself in the long run, in the end. And I can tell you a story about that, how close I was to get this book hijacked. But to stop my ranting, I will finish with a prayer. It goes like this. May the entire universe be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May everyone, and especially the ones who hurt us, be filled with peace and joy, love and light. May the light of truth overcome all darkness, so victory to that light.
Thank you so much, Ole. And
I just want to add also, I just remembered that on my website, you can go under the shop. There's one drop down where it says world's biggest murder mystery or something like that. Click there. There's a fee, a few dollars to get access to it, but there you have like 6 hours of presentation where I go through similar to what I'm doing now, but then if you can't stand the cliffhanger, then that's the option.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for bringing this out. And we look forward to part 3. And please stay on for a second after we go off the air, and hopefully we can schedule it if you have time. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. You're still recording, but
Yeah.